and a part of that fight for democracy was through the emergence of radical papers that were banned by the government. And the Act of Sedition title is taken from An Act of Sedition in 1819.
You're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're turning the page on an amazing book. It is called An Act of Sedition, and it is written by a terrific author. His name is Mike Gill. It is a powerful, politically charged dystopian thriller about the fight for democracy and freedom of expression. Set in a near-future UK, this gripping novel follows Ambrose Jackson, a high-flying journalist turned revolutionary, as he's thrust into a resistance movement against an increasingly authoritarian regime. With themes of rebellion, identity, and redemption, this timely novel echoes the warnings of history and the urgency of our present time. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for that description of the book. It nearly made me cry on.
Well, I'm glad it moved you. I'm glad it connected with you, because this book connected with me and with our entire staff. It is really riveting and very, very timely. Let's talk about what your inspiration was to write a dystopian novel set in the near future UK.
Well, what really inspired me was the way that authoritarianism was becoming part of the mainstream within the Western democracies, like Hungary, France, Italy, UK, and the USA, where things have become more and more acceptable, mainstream, and just becoming an increasing threat that authoritarianism can come under a cloak, take democracy through democracy, and diminish it almost immediately.
It is frightening, because people, like you say, and parties, like you say, can cloak themselves in the flag of freedom, where they're absolutely just the antithesis of that. I think this would be a terrific TV series or movie, and I think it could be based in the UK or the United States. Have you thought about putting this onto film, or hoping somebody picks it up and turns it into a film?
Well, yes, I have. I've thought about it both in the UK and in America, because the main cities that I use as a base of this are Manchester, Leeds, and Liverpool, and I transfer that thought to Chicago, New York, and LA, and I can see how the multicultural environments within those cities and large conurbations would be an almost exact replica, with some tweaks and changes, maybe some language changes, but generally speaking, I can see how it can transfer.
Absolutely. I think the same issues that are confronting the United Kingdom are confronting the United States, and vice versa as well. So I think these do feel in many ways like revolutionary times. So I think this would be great as a movie set in either the UK or the United States. So Hollywood, if you're listening, here's a film, a book that is ready to be translated into film and would be just terrific. Ambrose Jackson is an amazing character that you have created for this book, and his life, his journey goes through quite a transformation. Tell us a little bit about him and his journey.
Well, Ambrose is someone that's made a success through what he sees as the meritocracy, which is, I suppose, the American dream, the UK dream, if we had a similar thing, that we can rise via our merit and our achievements. And is of mixed race, he's from a working class family in Liverpool, and he kind of has assimilated into the professional culture and done that really well. But he's brought down with quite a bang by being arrested at a demonstration that he's accidentally caught up in. There he meets his kind of original mentor in the rebellion in favor of democracy. And he gets caught. He's reluctant. He's very reluctant at first, very reluctant to change his mind, change his ways. But his heart becomes a driver. His conscience becomes a driver, as well as having been pushed down. Because once he's arrested, he's charged with sedition under new legislation, and then he starts to lose his income. He starts to lose his commissions, lose his journalist jobs with the various newspapers. He loses all of those things. So he's being pushed down, down, down all the time. And then he has to hit rock bottom and fight his way back. So, and he's got a lot of issues, issues of class, issues of race, all the things that he then has to challenge, a lot of demons, and then but he wins through determination.
It certainly echoes what we see real life patriots going through in the world today. They're accused of treason, they're accused of sedition, they are canceled, they lose their position, they lose their money. And it's a horrible situation how people can actually be deleted today. And Ambrose Jackson shows that there is a way to fight back. And I think this ordinary man drawn into extraordinary circumstances is what in large part makes this book so compelling. In the book, you draw parallels between the government in your story to 1930s Germany. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's true. And the reason for that is that we might learn the lesson for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 years, 30 years, and then we start to forget that Germany became a fascist dictatorship. One election in 1933. They only had about a third of the electorate, and then once they were in, they took power. They accelerated legislation, mainly anti-Jewish legislation. They were riding on the back of nationalism, and I have read a lot of Mein Kampf. It's the hardest book I've ever had to read because, but I can see what's in that, and a lot of that is transferred into more subtly into the book, the way the regime operates. And you can see things like once in power, they claim the majority, then they start to undermine. And within the book, there's an example as we get through, local government starts to be closed down by the government and then task force get put in. And later on in the book, about 2/3 of the way through, the government passes a variation of a German act, the Emancipation Act, that put all power into the executive and totally demolished all other aspects of government. Again, the threat you might see in America is a plethora of executive orders go out and things happen. Everyone's trying to fight one after the other, but you've got this mass of them. And that's what the Germans did in the 1930s. That's what the Nazis did in the 1930s.
Yeah, it's frightening. There's a wave of anti-Semitism in the United States right now. You see Israel and Jewish people being protested against. Yeah. So it's very, very frightening. And I think many people have said this, that most democracies are just one election away from losing their freedoms altogether. And I think your book points that out very, very well, very, very strongly, particularly with its ties and parallels to 1930s Germany. Did your background in labor organizing influence your story at all?
I think a part of my background influenced it a lot, in particular the ethnicity of Ambrose, because Ambrose is in part based on an old friend of mine. She's called Kath Locke, and I met her whilst I was a trade union activist working on Greater Manchester buses. And she was of mixed race. She was born in 1928, mixed race. So you can imagine that is an unusual situation. So she had to confront racism. So through her, she was the one that encouraged me to go back into education, and whatever. She became my second mother, in a sense. And I always try and think of her when I write something. I'm kind of writing to her in a way, but I need to include that. So that part of the trade union and political background came into it because we designed together a lot of courses for people to address issues of racism in work and legislation and so on and so forth. So yeah, that is a flag that I'll always carry. I'll always carry Kath's flag.
Wonderful. That's a great connection, and it's great that you memorialize her legacy in this wonderful book that you have written. Are you planning a sequel, perhaps?
Not to that, but what I'm writing at the moment goes back to the early 19th century in Britain. And in a sense, An Act of Sedition is based on that period because it was a fight for democracy at that time. And a part of that fight for democracy was through the emergence of radical papers that were banned by the government. And the Act of Sedition title is taken from An Act of Sedition in 1819, that to suppress activity, to suppress the reform movement. And so now I'm writing that one. So I suppose it's a bit like not quite Star Wars, but the prequel coming after. What really inspired it was that democratic movement back then. And so, yeah, the one that I'm doing now is a historical novel, and took a lot of research. I'm about 15% through it now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think that sounds like a fantastic book as well. So we're looking forward to the release of that. Talk to us a little bit about why you thought it was important to emphasize artistic and musical expression in the resistance as you do in Act of Sedition.
I think that that's really important because when we look at polarization within politics, it quite often results in aggressive behavior on either side of it, and it becomes a conflict. But where's the benefit in the end? And when you look at the way the authoritarians take power, once they take power, they start to suppress art, they start to suppress music, they start to prevent people listening. And one of the inspirations for it for me was in the 1930s in Germany, probably into the 40s, there were kind of, in the rest of the world, in the Western world, America was dominating the music scene with the emergence of jazz and swing, all of these getting the market. And in Germany, they were seen as quite subversive when they tried to listen to jazz and swing music with its kind of jazz bass, gospel music, all those things that held people, going back further to the days of slavery and the emergence of gospel through slaves singing the way through the day, that kind of thing, keeping the spirits up, keeping a focus on a future, on something better. And so I wanted to use that as a vehicle. And because of all the cultures that make up the UK, it was fairly easy to identify a lot of different streams of music and art, theatre, all sorts of things that would fit into that kind of thing. What people are going to miss, what people would miss in Germany with the umpa music and the military choirs, all day long. That's what they're getting on the radio. And then you get some jazz coming into it. Then you get some, and after listening to umpa music all day, and someone plays a little bit of Duke Ellington, what are you going to do? You're gonna want to move a bit, and that kind of thing. This is what you're missing when authoritarians take over, when they tell you what you are going to listen to, and then people start to rebel. And the same with art. Again, in Germany, the 1930s onwards, the art was all very masculine men, very feminine women working in the fields with the hoes and everything. And the same in Russia under Stalin, the same kind of thing. And what did they miss? They missed that aspect of their culture that's in their heart, those things, Irish songs, folk songs, country and western, all those things, all the different genres of music. And people miss that.
Exactly. Sounds of music can be the sounds of resistance, can be the sounds of a revolution. And I think that is wonderful. And when they limit your freedom of speech, they're also limiting your freedom of expression. And I think you dramatically show that in your book by the artistic and music aspects of the resistance. Wonderfully done. Wonderful book all around. Highly recommended. It is called An Act of Sedition. It is a bold, unflinching look at what happens when freedom is taken for granted and how one man's transformation can ignite a movement. Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time, your insight, and your wisdom, and for this wonderful, wonderful book you've created. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.